So why do antibiotics work on bacteria, not viruses? So antibiotics are going to break down the cell wall of bacteria and stop them from reproducing. The problem, it doesn't work with viruses because viruses hijack our own cells and antibiotics cannot kill our own cells. So we're going to look at some challenges that the immune system has. So if you remember before, we talked about colds and how there are 100 different kinds of rhinoviruses. So that's why you keep consistently getting colds and you do not become immune to them. Another thing to think about is that viruses mutate. So even if you had that cold before, you can actually get it again if it mutates and your body does not recognize it. So how do you get this cold? So the viruses are outside of the body, so obviously they need to get in. So the entryways are going to be your eyes, nose, mouth. So you need to wash your hands so that if you do touch your eyes, nose, mouth, you're not transmitting that virus. It could be that somebody sneezed next to you. So it's very important that people cover their sneeze. And it's very important that you use your elbow and not your hands to cover your sneeze, because now it's on your hands. Now your hands are going to spread it everywhere. Unless you wash your hands right after, then it might be okay. So some interesting myths about colds. So cold and flu are different illnesses. We talked about this before. So cold and flu are caused by different viruses, so they're not the same. So colds are not caused by getting chilled. This was actually a really early belief that colds were caused by an imbalance of humors, or you were just a cold person. So like you were cold-hearted. The last thing, feed a cold, starve a fever. So this was also a very early thing where, as we said, people thought a cold could be caused by moisture or too much cold in their body, so they wanted to increase heat with fat, so by eating more. Or people that have a fever are too dry and hot, so they need less food or less fat reserve to cool them down. So these are all myths, they're not true. So if you remember, we talked about gastroenteritis being the stomach flu. So I hate to burst your bubble, but technically there is no stomach flu. So the flu is a respiratory virus. So you can't put respiratory virus with the stomach because it's not in the same area. So technically it's a virus of the stomach, but we just call it the stomach flu because we associate viruses with the flu. So now we're going to look at some home remedies. So echinacea is a type of flower that is said to strengthen the immune system. So it's been shown that it helps to produce more white blood cells, which is really helpful for fighting off infections. So I know I always increase my vitamin C intake when I have a cold. So vitamin C is necessary for a lot of vital functions in our body. One thing is that we've noticed that the absorption of it increases during illness, and it also has an antihistamine effect that reduces your symptoms of your immune system. So zinc has been shown to reduce the amount of time that you have a cold. The downside is that it can suppress the immune system too much, which is not good. And also the nasal sprays that include zinc can destroy your olfactory receptors. So it reduces your ability to smell over time. So it's very important that if you do use anything with zinc in it, that you use a very small amount. There's also new studies that show that vitamin D is good for helping the immune system, but it's fairly new research, so there's not a lot of information on it, but it does include things like fatty fish, healthy cereal, milk, cheese, etc. So things that are good for your body in general. So some other information that you need to know about the flu. So the flu can become a hybrid. So flus can affect between species. So if there's, for example, avian flu, it can actually affect humans. So that's one interesting fact about flus, that they can mutate over time to be able to affect different types or different species. So looking at some of the past flu pandemics, so 1918 was the avian flu or the bird flu. So this one was different than what we've seen before because the ones that were being affected were the healthy young individuals. So for this one, it was that if you had a really good immune system, yes, you were able to fight off the avian flu, but your immune system went too crazy and it kept fighting even though the flu had been gone. So if you remember back when we talked about why is it important to have the immune system stop, this is why, because it will start attacking yourself. And another more recent one, H1N1, so the swine flu or pig. So that pandemic was nowhere near the 1918 flu. All right, so moving on, allergies. So this is when your immune system overreacts to things that are harmless. So let's say, for example, you're outside and you're smelling the flowers and that pollen gets into the respiratory system. Technically, pollen is not harmful to us, but your body overreacts to that. So it thinks that pollen is really bad, and the next time it encounters it, your immune system has a full attack on that piece of pollen. So some people have allergies, some people don't. It depends on your immune system. So how does this happen? So if you remember, we talked about the mast cells that are releasing the histamine. So this is what starts it all. So the pollen is in the body. The mast cells are like, oh my gosh, there's something in here, releases the histamine to tell the B cells to release antibodies, etc. So when you take an antihistamine for your allergies, it's basically stopping the mast cells from releasing histamine so that you never have this response.